let's get a minimally viable product to a small segment of our population as quickly as we humanly can, and let's test what are we learning from that.
Welcome to our first Impatient podcast. We couldn't think of a better guest to have on.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and to be part of your inaugural podcast, and looking forward to having a combo.
You're the perfect person to bring on. You've spent your career disrupting conventional thinking within HR, and most notably at Coinbase, where you scaled the company up from to truly an AI-powered, high-talent company. And can't wait to hear the stories that you have and the lessons learned. What did you notice was the immediate currency when you joined Coinbase with your CEO?
Well, I think Brian's just a fascinating and just wonderful guy. Like, I mean, here's a guy that's like sort of reinventing an entire ecosystem around financial services and driving economic freedom, and somebody that has sort of the conviction to think about that isn't going to accept that things are just going to be done the same way that they've been done before. Like, you're not going to walk in and say, well, Brian, here's how I did it at Red Hat, or here's how I did it at Citadel, and we're just going to do it exactly that way.
Right.
There's much more of a first principles sort of orientation and really understanding like what are we trying to achieve and why are we trying to achieve it. The other thing that's really valuable at Coinbase, which I think I talk to a lot of leaders about employing, is this idea of like really helping us have a choice. I think with Brian, and all of the Coinbase leadership, coming to them with a well-researched like 2 or 3 different ideas of how you could attack any single problem, and making a recommendation, that was a great currency. Coming with this is the only way to do it was a good way to sort of get, kicked to the door and said, hey, you haven't really thought this problem through. And so I think that one of the things that really was great about Coinbase was it challenged me to look at problems holistically and with a very fresh set of eyes and consider what were different ways to design solutions. Yeah. Great, have a strong recommendation, but show that you can look at the problem from multiple angles. And the one thing I'll say that I always tell people is Brian's been right 95% of the time. So whenever I'm always like, I'm not so sure, but I've taught myself to say he's probably right. Go learn LJ and think about why he's thinking about that.
Yeah. No, that's what we call great EQ.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So let's talk about the core here, which is how Coinbase approaches AI fluency. And so Brian famously has a mandate around fluency and sort of broke a lot of glass and said, I think you have a week, to get on board and demonstrate it. If you don't, you're going to have to speak to me personally.
Yep.
Tell us about that. What happened? What were the outcomes?
Yeah. Brian gave a mandate to every software engineer in the company that they had to sign up for, I believe it was a Microsoft Copilot account by the end of the week. And that he was going to host a call on Saturday morning with me and him. And anybody who didn't sign up had to join that call and explain to him, why hadn't they signed up for their Microsoft Pilot account? Yeah. And you hear that in a flash, you'd be like, what's going on? This is crazy. And I actually think there's a lot of sanity in the way that we do this. Coinbase as a company is very optimistic about technology. Yeah. We want to attract and we want people who see the power of technology to make us a better company and a better society. And part of that techno-optimism is like really quickly embracing these key technologies and getting in and getting your hands dirty. One of the things that Brian really believes is that action provides information. And so, if you're not willing to sign up for an account and even experiment with Copilot, then what information are we getting? But if you're willing to sign up for an account and start to use it, then you can give us information about, is it working? Is it useful? Is it making us better? Is it not? And so I think what he was really just saying to the org is like, look, we're techno-optimists. We believe in the power of this technology. We're going to get there quickly. And the other thing it speaks to is the way we think about change management. That might be another conversation for us. But I think that, prior to my Coinbase time, much of my HR career was working in organizations where the idea of change management was sort of this very slow, methodical, and sometimes probably sort of drudgery.
For the people, by the people.
Yeah, where you were just slowly sort of dipping your toe into things, letting people get a little bit comfortable with it, not trying to, ruffle any feathers. And I think one of the things that I've really learned over the years working at Coinbase, which, if I were ever to work somewhere else, I would take with me is, you are better to dive in and get to the other side of the change curve quickly and and just sort of say where you're going. And so, the thing you're talking about got a little press at the time because people put some notes out about it and there were some posts on it and things. But at the end of the day, what we did was we got the organization moving towards AI really quickly. And it worked out great.
Honestly, I mean, it doesn't seem that bad asking people to use Copilot. I mean, all of us now use some sort, ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or something every day anyway now. So
well, that's the other thing I've learned, in one of the things that like years of doing this in perspective is, some of these things that feel like they're really unreasonable asks. I don't think that was, but in any case, even if you feel that, you look back 6, 12, 24 months later and you're like,
so bad.
That was nothing. Right? What are we thinking? So, I think it ended up being fine for the organization. And it set a tone for us, which actually then permeated the whole organization around sort of our aggressive adoption of AI and our focus on really making sure that every aspect of the company was looking to get more efficient and leverage this technology and learn as we go forward, how can we best apply it in our operations?
Yeah. So I'd love to maybe just double click into that a little bit more and specifically, what are the expectations around AI fluency and how they use it, and how do you hold people accountable to it?
Well, first of all, we have an expectation now that every employee in the company is going to be using AI in some meaningful way in their job. We've sort of just laid that out. Every employee, as part of their perf cycle, has a question of like, how did you apply AI to your job in the last year? So we have a very clear expectation that it's permeating every function, every role.
Yep.
Maybe that's as simple as, did you use Gemini in some meaningful way? Maybe it's something more in the development tools. But we want everybody using it. And the other thing I would say is culturally, what it is for us is two things. Like, it's not just like we talk about what would seem like the stick part of it, right? Like, oh, you have to sign up for Copilot, or oh, it's part of your perf. Yep. There's also a lot of carrot. We have an award every quarter for the engineer who has applied AI the best possible way in the organization. We want to highlight that. Yeah. As we do our performance management, our very top people, our two highest ratings people can, get 1.5, 2x compensation. Yeah, that's permeating into our engineering organization. The people who are really adopting AI, I think will see that. So we're creating not just a culture that says, hey, this is something you have to do, but also really a culture that says when we see greatness, we're going to reward that greatness and we're all going to learn from it and sort of accelerate the company from it.
So let's talk about the people team. So building an AI-powered company as a very, first principle, how has that changed the shape of the people team, some of the roles and responsibilities, maybe some of your core processes? You had shared with me you built this awesome AI screening assistant called Milo.
Yep.
So maybe you could share a couple of examples of things you're doing, and what do you see? How do you see the shape of HR changing?
Yeah, so look, I think AI has in some degree permeated, I would think, almost every aspect of our HR team. The leading examples are probably in recruiting. We did last year, at the beginning of last year, the beginning of 2025, I laid out sort of an audacious goal for us. And I said, by the beginning of this year, by the beginning of 2026, I want to have every job be able to, that we have posted, to be able that someone can start immediately with an AI interview. They can just click and says interview now, any time of day, anywhere they can.
Is it an option to speak to a human, or
we've over time now evolved it so that pretty much that is the first step. But that was sort of, I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. So that was sort of my thesis here was really, look, we've been very fortunate. We had 1.5 million job applicants the year before I had suggested this mandate, right? That's crazy. And so the thing that I was thinking about is, even with the best intentioned, hardest working recruiting team in the world, we'd probably be lucky to talk to 10,000 of those people, right? We hired, in the year we had 1.5 million, we hired 1,500 people. Yeah. So the thing that I saw in AI was really a power of like democratizing and creating an unbiased way for anybody to get an interview on demand. Yeah. And so we did spend last year building an agent. We call the agent is named Milo. I had a lot of great time. Just goes back to like learning about getting in the weeds. I spent hours and hours up late at night interviewing with Milo myself, trying to trip him up, trying to be a jerk, trying to speak gibberish, trying to like improve the AI over and over again. So I spent a lot of time in the weeds on this. And we've over the year perfected it to the point now, I heard yesterday in my update, we now have had 150 people hired whose first interview was with the Milo agent. So we're now getting to a world where you can start your recruiting process and get interviewed by our AI agent. So when you say to me, how's it changed the shape of your HR organization? What I say to you is I think it changes the shape of my growth curve. I'm not worried about it like dramatically reducing the workforce. I don't think people are going to lose their job to AI. I think they will be subject to concerns about if they're not proficient in AI, can they lose their job to someone who is proficient in AI?
Right.
But what I see it changing is the rate of my growth curve. I could see a world where I've hit peak HR team size, right? And yet I could see the company getting bigger and bigger over time. But I think the efficiency that we're going to be able to see with these tools is going to allow us to just fundamentally, sort of bend the curve back down on growth rate. So that to me is where, and I think we're going to see that just kind of move through every aspect of the function. We're already seeing it in our talent management team. We've dramatically reduced, I think, the complexity and the level of effort in collecting peer reviews and writing your own self-review and manager reviews. And so I think when you start extrapolating that savings, you start seeing just a fundamentally different shaped team, because now you don't have to have a team that's scaling at the rate of your company just to keep doing manual tasks. The AI sort of scales unlimitless, right? An unlimited curve.
Sure.
And now you just are freeing your people up to work in different areas. And so that's kind of, as I see it right now, I think that the shape and the consistency doesn't change so much, so as that I don't think we have to grow in the way that at least I had become accustomed to growing in past jobs. It's an absolutely enthralling time, I think, to be in this role because of how powerful I think all these tools will be in HR.
I couldn't agree, but it's really like an unlock for our potential. And this goes back to one of the early points about change management, which you sort of learn that action gives you the best information.
Yep.
And so maybe you can just share a little bit about how you decide, well, we're just going to do it. I'm not going to really ask for permission. I'm going to do it. I'm going to test it, see what happens.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say to your CHRO audience out there is you got to have a great legal team. So
Yes, 100%.
I have an absolutely phenomenal employment legal partner, and I call him up and I say, look, I'm going to do something. It's going to be on the edge. I need your help to make sure that we're compliant and we're doing this the right way. And he and his team are just phenomenal about letting us innovate, but do it within the laws and regulations. And that partnership, I think, is essential, particularly in a technology like AI, where certainly there are concerns in the world about how it's being applied. And then there's also just a lot of like ambiguity in how the laws are going to be applied. So that's one thing. What we do is we go and we really but we pilot. And so the way I think about this is we're really trying to run our HR team as to the extent that we possibly can, like a product organization.
Yeah.
And the way that I think about that with the team is, let's get a minimally viable product to a small segment of our population as quickly as we humanly can, and let's test what are we learning from that. And then that allows us not to boil the ocean. It allows us not to take forever to get that information.
Right.
And it allows us to start iterating very quickly. So we generally look for, in the case of this, we were like, who are the people out there who share our passion around this in the organization, where we can roll out some of these tests early on, where we can do, no harm, and we can get some great outcomes. And so we've really iterated by starting with like friendly audiences inside the organization that were jobs that we thought this would work, learning as we did that, then rolling it out, one job, then 5 jobs, then 10 jobs, now to the point that it's out in every job where we're allowed to from a jurisdiction perspective and sort of legally compliant. So, part of it is just applying that MVP mindset. Don't boil the ocean.
Yep.
Don't try to build a finished product. Get something out that you can get feedback on.
Yeah. And you have to have the culture that supports that kind of thinking, which is also really, that's a big, I think that's a sea change for many corporations where they're very slow, methodical, risk averse, and, let's make sure we bring people along. And to your point, I think, I'm sure your CEO sets that tone that this is the way we operate.
What I can say is I'll never be as fortunate again as I was to work for Brian, Emily, and all of the Coinbase team, because every meeting we start, company meetings, like talent is our number one operational priority.
Yeah.
And they walk the talk like I've never seen. And so whenever we talk about, is there something we can do to up our talent quality or up our outcomes, they're all in. And so, when I see companies out there talking about talent, I'm always questioning, like, is the senior team behind it? Because I think that has been one of the biggest differentials for why Coinbase has been successful and why we've been able to just sort of navigate the environment that's been so wild because Brian and Emily have been so passionate about top talent in every seat.
As you think about how you approach talent density, which is really core, I think, to your strategy, what does that look like across your talent life cycle? And how is it not? How do you frame it in a way that's not threatening to your employees? Right, less is more in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, first thing I would say, just being candid, I don't think I don't stop and think about it as not threatening. I think of it as how do we set a really high standard and how do we call people to that really high standard, right? So it's less about how do we make them comfortable and more to how do we have, just the highest of standards and drive engagement and energy because we have such high standards. Again, to me, this resonates back to some of the sort of great sports teams in the world. When they had an incredible goal and they're going to go win a championship, they're not trying to worry about, are they making people feel comfortable? They're trying to worry about, are they building a great organization that can do great things?
Right. Unapologetic.
Yeah, we're just unapologetic about wanting to have high standards. Now, one of the things I'll say is, look, we are extraordinarily overt about that in our culture. When you interview with us and any of our postings and our website, and when we do external events, like we don't run from that. And I think so. One of the things we get is a little bit of people know what they're getting into when they join. And so it's pretty easy for them to understand those standards. We still believe in generally sort of a segmented performance curve. So we have a world where not everybody's going to get one of our top 2 ratings. Most of our population is going to get a meet expectations. We hold a very high bar on differentiating outsized performance, and we tell our people that's going to raise every year. So if I manage to get one of those outsized performance ratings in this year, I can expect that the same level of effort and the same outcome and sort of the same outcomes will not yield that same rating the next year because we're pushing ourselves to get better and better and better. And then look, talk about unapologetic. Brian and I, we definitely have a lens towards that. We do understand that we will have some level of our population that won't make it year over year. So in a world where it used to be sort of you didn't talk about that, we're very candid that in any given year, we will probably have to take some action and remove some percentage of our organization that's not meeting our standards because we have to continue to trim and make sure that we're maintaining those high standards. So, and then the other part, which I talked about before, is you can have all that diligence around quality and you can have all that diligence around standards. And then when you do have those elite people that are outperforming, well, we really outsize reward them. And so what we see from that is that the kind of people who opt into Coinbase, when they're all aware about this, that's what they want. They want to go for that top rating. They're willing to compete at that level because they get energy from sort of working in an environment around other great people and pushing themselves and sort of getting to the highest standards.
Yeah, I love it. And also, the benefit of having great people is they elevate people around them.
They elevate everybody around them. And at the end of the day, the way I often think about this is, look, if you spend 2 or 3 years in that environment, I think we've been very fortunate to have a really strong talent brand. I think we're known for having a high quality of people. Hopefully people stay for a lot longer. I've been here 7 years. But if at the end of the day you do that for several years and then you end up going somewhere else, you're probably setting yourself up for an unbelievable trajectory in those other environments as well. So, I think a lot of times what you see is just being part of this kind of organization opens up other avenues for people.
100%. All right, so last question, which is the theme of this podcast is impatient. It's about disruptive thinkers, and particularly in the HR space. So what's one thing you're impatient about now?
I think I've always been someone that wanted to innovate, that wanted to push new ideas. I think that for a long time, it's been very, very difficult to do that because technology and process would often slow you down.
Yeah.
And I do think that this is something that's been endemic of a lot of HR organizations where you would, you'd get asked to do something and you'd say, great, we'll come back to you in a year with this new program or something like that. To me, and this dovetails to the AI piece, the power of AI now has created a world where MVPs and iterations should happen lightning fast. There's no more reason that I shouldn't be able to say to someone hey, let's try this new idea. And some version of that new idea doesn't get live in 30 days or 60 days for some reason.
Yeah.
And I think where I'm finding myself, I'm fortunate. I have just the most wonderful team. They are an incredible group of innovators. I could spend hours on your podcast giving you examples of where they've innovated in a very rapid nature. But where I do find myself still impatient is when I get something back that tells me that, hey, there's all these roadblocks and slowness to getting something live, because I think the world now demands that CHROs and HR organizations, if not every organization, move at a much higher rate of agility. And so the thing I'm really trying to get impatient with the org on is don't be slow to market.
Yep.
Be willing to fail, be willing to move quickly, and be willing to get that information, because now the technology enables you to do it, where maybe before you it didn't have that. And I want people to not fall back on that sort of, oh, it's going to take a little bit too long.
Yeah, and you had said it, you summed it up so well, which is think about HR as a product organization, which is a great way to think about it. So, LJ, this has been a pleasure. I've learned a lot and really grateful for our time together.
Yeah, really, again, thank you. Honor to be on the inaugural podcast. I'm looking forward to being a loyal viewer and seeing a lot of other great things here. So thanks for the time. Great to be here.
All right, appreciate it.
Thanks.